Life on the Oregon Trail was not easy. There were attacks from hostile tribes, accidents and deaths, disease, hunger, exhaustion, and, above all, boredom. Despite these challenges, thousands of settlers braved the hardships of the Oregon Trail during the mid-1800s. The vast majority of those who traveled the trail did so in covered wagons. Covered wagons were the primary mode of transportation for settlers moving west, and although they look quaint today, covered wagons were the lifeline that allowed families to survive the arduous journey. So what exactly was life like in one of these covered wagons? What did they look like? How did people stay safe inside them? How did they cook meals or sleep at night? You're about to find out. Welcome to my channel. And today, let's find out what it would be like to live in a covered wagon. Now, before we hop into the covered wagon, we should take a closer look at the outside of the wagon. These bad boys were built to last. Each wagon consisted of a bed or tray attached to 4 large wheels and an axle. The bed was typically made of wood and was covered with a layer of canvas. It was this canvas covering that gave the wagon its name, Covered Wagon. Now, don't go thinking these coverings were there to protect the passengers from the weather or make for a comfortable ride. That's not the case. The canvas was there primarily to keep the cargo dry and safe from the elements. As for the passengers, they rode on the wagon bed behind the cover, exposed to the sun, rain, dust storms, and everything else the prairie had to offer. As you can imagine, the ride was pretty bumpy. Settlers tried to lessen the jolting by placing a layer of straw or other soft material on the bed of the wagon, but it didn't do much to soften the ride. Passengers often complained of being bruised and sore from the constant shaking and bumping. Now, the size of a covered wagon varied, but they were generally around 12 to 14 feet long and 6 to 8 feet wide. A typical wagon might have a single entrance on the side, and the canvas top was held up by wooden bows or poles that were tied to the wagon bed. These wagons were designed to be light enough to be pulled by oxen, horses, or mules. But despite their sturdiness, they were surprisingly lightweight, weighing only about 2,500 pounds, which is less than 3 tons. Inside the wagon, things were cramped and uncomfortable. In fact, the entire concept of comfort was pretty much non-existent. The space inside a covered wagon was minimal, especially since it also served as the family's living room, dining room, and bedroom. Families would typically place their supplies in the wagon bed, then huddle together in the back corner to sleep. It wasn't uncommon for parents to share a bed with their children while also having to store their food and other supplies nearby. The lack of privacy was also comical. Settlers often had to cook meals while sitting next to each other, and they had no way to shield themselves from the elements. They couldn't close the door and turn off the world. They were at the mercy of nature. Meals inside a covered wagon were likely bland and repetitive. There wasn't much room to prepare elaborate dishes, and fresh food was scarce. Dried goods like beans, rice, and flour were common staples, along with salted meats. Breakfast might consist of coffee and hardtack, a type of hard, dry bread that was meant to last for years. Lunch would often be a repeat of breakfast, and dinner might feature boiled beans or rice. It wasn't uncommon for settlers to catch fish along the river to add some variety to their meals. And if game was plentiful, hunters might venture out to bag an animal for the community. However, collecting firewood was a challenge. Settlers had to find dead branches and logs, which were often scarce near the river where they camped. Gathering enough wood for a fire took time, effort, and planning. Toilets were a luxury on the Oregon Trail. Settlers had to relieve themselves away from camp and be mindful of predators looking for an easy meal. Settlers were constantly on the lookout for wild animals that might be attracted to their food or their presence. Bears, wolves, snakes, and mountain lions were among the predators that lurked in the wilderness. To protect themselves, settlers would often travel in groups, making it harder for animals to sneak up on them. They would also carry firearms and make sure they were well stocked with ammunition. Cooking inside a covered wagon was challenging. Settlers typically cooked their meals outside the wagon using a campfire or a small stove. The smoke from the fire would often waft into the wagon, mingling with the smells of their supplies and making for a unique aroma. Sometimes the smoke from the fire would be too much of a hassle, so settlers would use heated rocks to cook steam-based meals inside their wagons. One advantage of the design of the covered wagon was that it could double as a mobile kitchen. If a storm rolled in, the settlers could pull up the canvas cover and continue cooking their meal inside the wagon. Sleeping in a covered wagon was never easy. Families would snuggle together in the back corner of the wagon, trying to stay warm and cozy. Blankets and quilts were used as makeshift beds, and the constant motion of the wagon made sleeping more difficult. Settlers often woke up stiff and sore from sleeping in uncomfortable positions. Noise was another challenge. The sounds of the trail echoed inside the wagon, making it hard to fall asleep. Settlers had to endure the creaking of the wagon, the snorts of the oxen, and the occasional shout or song from fellow travelers. Settlers were also vulnerable to the harsh weather conditions on the Oregon Trail. Summers were hot and dry, and the canvas roof offered little insulation. Winters could be bitterly cold, and settlers had to rely on layers of blankets and quilts to keep warm. Storms were also a problem, as the canvas roof did little to protect settlers from rain or snow. Settlers often woke up to the sound of rain drumming on the roof of their wagon, soaking their blankets and supplies. So, how does all this sound to you? Would you be able to handle life in a covered wagon? Let me know in the comments below. Also, do you think the covered wagons were comfortable? No, but for the settlers traveling west, they were a symbol of hope and opportunity. They represented the chance to start new lives in a new land, even if that meant enduring cramped, uncomfortable conditions. Covered wagons were more than just a means of transportation. They were a testament to the resilience and determination of the pioneers who settled the American West. Each wagon bed holds stories of families who huddled together inside, dreaming of the future that awaited them. And that concludes our journey through life in a covered wagon. These pioneers certainly faced incredible challenges. Their bravery and resourcefulness are truly remarkable. Thank you for joining us today. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more journeys through history. Until next time, stay curious and keep exploring. And remember, you can support us on Patreon. Until next time, wake up early, walk all day, drive the oxen, mend the wagon, cook a meal, eat, and then go to bed early. That's what most days on the Oregon Trail looked like for the thousands of settlers who traveled it in the 1800s. The journey west was long, hard, and dangerous, but most of those who started the trek actually made it to Oregon. What did daily life on the Oregon Trail look like? How did travelers stay sane while living out of a wagon for months at a time? Let's find out. Life on the Oregon Trail was a slow, grinding routine. Most travelers walked, though some rode horses or sat in the wagon. Drivers had the hardest job, cracking whips and shouting commands to the oxen as they pulled the heavy wagons over rough terrain. Those on foot walked behind the wagon train at a good pace, about 3 miles an hour. It took about 10 to 15 miles a day because the trail was dusty and rocky. Travelers had to watch where they put their feet and stumbled often. And if they fell, there wasn't much to break their fall. A cut, scrape, or bruise could easily become infected and turn into something serious. If the traveler was lucky enough to have a horse, he or she would ride ahead of the wagon train, acting as a scout. It was important to know what lay ahead on the trail. Sometimes the going was so rough that drivers got thrown from the wagons. If that happened, they would be covered with dust and cuts from head to toe. They'd have to patch themselves up and their wagon as best they could. They didn't want to waste valuable time waiting for someone to come back and help them get up. Every minute they spent on the ground was a minute they weren't earning wages, and time was money. The sun beat down mercilessly on the plains. Soon a light breeze turned into a hot wind blowing red dust in travelers' faces and whipping through the cracks in their wagons. People wrapped wet cloths around their heads and necks to help cool off. Occasionally, a thunderstorm popped up out of nowhere. When rain finally hit the parched ground, everyone cheered. But soon they cursed as the ruts filled with mud, making the trail even rougher. After the storm passed, the travelers had to wait for the ground to dry before they could continue. If they moved forward while the trail was still muddy, the wheels could easily get stuck in the soft earth and break the wagon bed. So travelers waited patiently, hoping the sun would shine and warm the ground quickly. When the sun went down, the temperature plummeted. Temperatures often dropped below freezing, even in the middle of summer. Travelers huddled around their wagons for warmth. Children snuggled between their parents, seeking the comfort and protection of their bodies. Some families had blankets or quilts to wrap around themselves, but most people just shivered until morning. When the wind blew, it was even colder. Biting winds whipped across the plains, whistling through the dried grass and swirling sand around travelers' legs. Some families built brush shelters to block the wind, but they weren't very effective. Many times pioneers huddled together for warmth and comfort. For the thousands of children traveling on the Oregon Trail, the trip was both a playground and a prison. The open range was a place to run and play. In the open grasslands, children could let their imaginations run wild. Sometimes they pretended to be cowboys herding cattle or Native Americans on the warpath. Other times they chased prairie dogs or tried to catch rabbits that darted across the trail, but mostly the trail was a prison. There wasn't much to do day after day, and the lullaby of the wind and the creak of the wagon wheels soon grew tiresome. Children were tired of eating the same foods, tired of sleeping on the hard ground, and tired of the constant motion. Many times they felt like screaming or breaking things. But pioneer children learned self-control early. Most knew that their family depended on them doing their chores, and no one else was going to take care of the animals or cook the meals. They also knew that throwing tantrums wouldn't help them and would only make their parents upset. There were few toys for children on the Oregon Trail. They made do with whatever they had, like sticks, rocks, rags, and tin cans. Children used their imaginations to entertain themselves. They invented games and rules and made sure everyone followed them. This was especially true when the wagon train stopped for the night. As soon as the sun dipped below the horizon, the camp came alive with activity. Families bustled about their evening chores, feeding and grooming their animals, gathering wood and cooking dinner. While parents worked, children helped as much as they could. They stirred the cooking pot, carried water, and chopped wood with small axes. They also kept an eye on younger siblings, playing with them when they had free time. But even after all that, there was still plenty of time before bedtime. And children needed to find ways to fill the hours. They sang songs, told stories, and made up games to keep themselves busy. The wagons were close together, so children could easily climb into other wagons for a game of hide and seek. When the moon rose high in the sky, it was easy to tell who was bored. Noisy games and excited shouts echoed through the camps. As the night wore on, the sound of children at play slowly faded away. Parents called their children inside the wagons to get ready for bed. The night on the Oregon Trail was filled with sounds. Settlers cooked their supper over crackling fires, families talked and laughed together, and crickets chirped in the tall grass. But it wasn't always easy to get a good night's sleep. Sometimes animals howled or cried out in the darkness. Thunder rumbled in the distance, where the wind suddenly picked up, shaking the wagons and making the canvas walls flap wildly. Other times, a family might wake up to the smell of smoke. A fire might have broken out in the camp, where someone might have left a campfire burning and the wind could have fanned the embers into a blaze. Whatever the reason, when a fire broke out, everyone had to pitch in to help. Men, women, and children grabbed buckets of water and raced toward the flames. If the fire spread to the supplies, the whole wagon train could be destroyed. People also worried about the future. Every day on the Oregon Trail brought new challenges. Would the weather hold? Would someone get sick? Would they have enough food? Would their oxen pull them to the end of the trail? These thoughts ran through the minds of many pioneers. Some prayed for guidance and strength. Others just lay in the darkness and hoped for a better day. Wagon trains were usually made up of several families traveling together. There were so many dangers on the Oregon Trail that it was safer to travel in numbers. Men usually met each morning to plan the day's journey. They checked the weather, the condition of the trail, and the health of their oxen. Once the plan was made, the families packed up their wagons and hit the road. Traveling in a group meant that families had more resources than if they had been alone. They shared food and supplies, and if one family had an extra blanket or an extra horse, they could lend it to another family. When one family needed to stop for the night, the others did too. A wagon train was also a community. Each family had a different skill set, and the groups benefited from everyone's talents. Maybe one family was skilled at mending wagons, while another was great at hunting. Whatever skills the travelers had, they shared them with the others. The men fixed wagons, cooked meals, and cared for the oxen. Women washed clothes, sewed, and also cared for the animals. Children helped with whatever they could, gathering firewood, caring for younger siblings, and entertaining the adults. Wagon trains also watched out for each other. If a family was struggling, the others would pitch in and help. Maybe they would send some of their strongest men to help a family get their wagon out of the mud or offer to trade for extra supplies. Living in a wagon train was difficult, but the tight bonds that formed between families helped them through the hard times. Some travelers did make it to Oregon, but many turned back after facing hardships on the trail. Others never made it at all. Thousands of pioneers died on the Oregon Trail, most of them children. Those who lived, though, carried with them the memories of their long journey to Oregon. They remembered the excitement of seeing a wagon train for the first time, the comfort of family and friends, and the satisfaction of a job well done. They also remembered the hardships along the way, the scorching sun, biting winds, the loneliness of the trail, and the ever-present fear of the next challenge. The Oregon Trail was a test of endurance, but those who traveled it changed American history forever. Thanks for watching. If you liked this video, click the thumbs up button below to let us know. Then subscribe so you don't miss any of our new videos. The year is 1848. The place, a prairie not far from the Missouri River. You have traveled west for months on the Oregon Trail with thousands of covered wagons stretching as far as you can see. The wagons rumble and shake as they move along the rutted path. People are making the journey of their lives. They're leaving the only home they've ever known for a chance at something better out west. It's hard work, it's dangerous too, and even though you're moving forward every day, there's a sense of foreboding. You know that some of your companions won't make it. Death is always lurking around the bend. How will you escape its grasp? How will you survive the journey? Let's find out. Yet the dangers were ever present. River crossings could be deadly. If a wagon overturned, the passengers risked being crushed by the others coming behind them. If an ox or horse panicked and jumped into a river, it might drag its team of oxen or horses down with it. Accidents with guns, axes, or wagon wheels happened almost daily. A spill of even a small amount of gunpowder could blow off a hand or worse. Frayed wagon ropes often snapped, sending heavy loads crashing to the ground and crushing feet. Illnesses spread quickly among the crowded wagons, and the Native American tribes, who otherwise were usually peaceful, occasionally created conflicts that arose from misunderstandings or disputes over territory. By the end of each day, travelers were exhausted, sore, and dirty. Yet they had to rest, eat, and prepare for the next day's journey, no matter how tired or discouraged they felt. During the 1840s, thousands of people left their homes and set out across the United States for the Oregon Territory. Why did they do this? Well, one major reason was to claim land. Once people made it to Oregon, each adult male could claim 320 acres of land for himself, with additional acreage for his wife and children. They could then sell or do whatever they wanted with the land. So if they survived the journey, they would have something of value when they arrived. Also, many settlers had been hearing about the lush valleys and fertile soil of the Willamette Valley in Oregon for years. They believed it was like a piece of heaven on earth. They also heard that the climate was more like that of the eastern states than the arid lands further south. Thus, it was a land of plenty where crops grew easily and thrived. The Oregon Trail was the most popular route to the Willamette Valley because it offered the best chance of survival. But the 2,000-mile trip was fraught with danger. Most of the time, travelers moved slowly along a well-worn path that was originally used by Native Americans and later improved by fur traders. Because the trail was often little more than a goat path carved into the landscape by countless pairs of moccasins, it wasn't wide enough for two wagons to travel abreast. The path went over hills and through valleys, crossing rivers and arroyos. Some parts were easy going, while other sections required pulling up steep mountains or slogging through mud. The trail twisted and turned, taking travelers through three distinct environments: grasslands, deserts, and mountains. Each presented its own challenges. The vast grasslands were hot and exposed, with few trees for shade and little protection from the elements. Then came the deserts, where travelers had to ration their meager supplies of water and watch out for deadly snakes and scorpions. Finally, there were the Rocky Mountains, whose steep slopes and winding paths seemed to go on forever. These were just some of the landscapes travelers faced as they followed the Oregon Trail. Many travelers started their journey in Independence, Missouri. From here, the trail went west through Kansas and Nebraska, past Fort Laramie in Wyoming, then into the heart of the Rocky Mountains. There, travelers would cross several mountain ranges before reaching the Great Basin and finally Oregon. Most traveled during the spring and summer months, but that meant sharing the trail with thousands of others doing the same thing. This led to traffic jams, especially at river crossings and when groups of wagons decided to travel together for safety. Sometimes travelers had to wait days to cross a river. If a storm hit, conditions could become unbearable. Thousands of wagons stuck in the mud or snow could mean a long delay and low supplies. Then there was the threat of attack. Bandits traveling in disguise robbed some pioneers, while others lost everything when their wagons were attacked by Native Americans. As you make your way west, you hear the rumble of thunder in the distance. Lightning flashes illuminate the angry sky overhead. Soon heavy raindrops begin to fall. The wagon you're in tilts sharply as the wheels sink into the mud. Rain pours through cracks in the canvas covering, soaking the bedding and supplies inside. Storms like this could turn a normally dry and dusty trail into a sloppy mess that slowed progress and made everyone miserable. Travelers pulled out their oilskin ponchos to keep themselves dry, but the constant drizzle soaked them anyway. The continuous chill dampened their spirits as much as their clothing. Sometimes rain fell for days, turning the trail into a sea of mud. Travelers either waited for the weather to clear or pushed on regardless, sinking to their waists in mud and water. Such was the case when the entire emigrant train got stuck in the mud on the banks of the Elkhorn River near present-day Nebraska City, Nebraska. Many families had to abandon their wagons and walk the remaining miles to higher ground. Others left their wagons behind altogether and walked back east to Independence, Missouri, rather than continuing the journey. Along the trail, supplies dwindled and tempers flared. There was little privacy and even less comfort. Travel on the trail was difficult, dirty, and exhausting. However, the dream of new lives in Oregon kept travelers moving forward. You wake up early, rubbing the sleep from your eyes. Sunlight streams through cracks in the wagon's wooden slats. Outside, you hear the murmur of voices and the clatter of pots and pans. It's time to start the day's journey. You help your family pack up camp, then climb into the wagon with your siblings. Someone hands you a piece of jerky to eat. It's hard, dry, and tasteless, but it will keep you strong as you travel. Your father takes the reins and directs the oxen toward the rising sun. The wheels rumble over the uneven ground. You settle in among sacks of flour, barrels of water, and boxes of tools, along with your sleeping family. Life on the trail was difficult for children. Pioneers expected their kids to help with everyday chores. This included cooking, cleaning, caring for younger siblings, and helping to drive the oxen. Children also had to be aware of their surroundings at all times. They learned early to look out for snakes, wild animals, thorny bushes, and holes that could turn a simple trip outside the wagon into a dangerous ordeal. They also had to endure the sights, sounds, and smells of life on the trail, including the stench of human and animal waste and the sight of dead bodies littering the path. Most children never complained. Instead, they helped their families get through each day, hoping that soon they, too, would enjoy the luxury of a real bed, chairs, tables, and perhaps even books and toys. But for now, their world was confined to the four walls of a wagon. That was until one day when their wagon stopped moving and their parents told them they had arrived in Oregon. But sadly, not everyone made it. While pioneer women gave birth to nearly 10,000 babies on the Oregon Trail, only about 75% of the children born on the trail survived. Many died from diseases such as cholera and dysentery, which caused diarrhea and bleeding in the intestines. Others perished from accidents or injuries sustained while traveling. Still, others simply succumbed to the exhaustion and stress that came with life on the trail. When a child died on the Oregon Trail, the family would usually bury the body under the wagon or alongside the path. Graves were marked with a wooden stake and a small pile of stones. Many pioneers also carved an inscription on the stake to mark the grave. The inscriptions often included the child's name, age, and date of death. Some pioneers took a more permanent measure, burying their dead in a metal coffin that was made especially for the journey. These coffins were typically made of tin or zinc and lined with velvet or other soft material. They were designed to be lightweight yet sturdy enough to withstand the rigors of the journey. Despite the difficulty of burying a loved one on the side of a trail, pioneers understood the importance of providing their children with a proper burial. They believed that doing so would ensure that the child's spirit could rest in peace. Now it's time to make your journey. Click on this video to learn about the challenges pioneers faced on the Oregon Trail, including the threat of disease and injury. And don't forget to subscribe for more exciting historical adventures.